Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's virtual training session for today. My name's Mike. I'm a project coordinator here with Africa Fire Mission, and I'm so happy that you all took time out of your busy schedules to come and join us for today's training. Today, we have with us Howard Cohen. Howard's retired fire chief. He is our virtual training coordinator here at AFM. He's been an instructor for us many times. Many of you know him. He does a great job. We're so happy he's here today with us. We're continuing our series on sort of health and mental health, and he's going to be talking about critical stress incident management, which is a very important subject facing us firefighters today. Before we get started, I'm going to pass it over to Jose, AFM's fire safety advocate, for a word of encouragement.
Thank you so much, Chief Mike, and thank you so much, Chief Howard. My name is Jose Ngunjiri. I'm the fire safety advocate, and today I'm joined by Madam November, who's a fire safety advocate. Yeah, she joined me today, and we were running around. That's why I'm really sweating. We're just from an activation in Madare. So today's encouragement, I'd prepared it earlier on. I was just reading through my old newspapers, and there's one newspaper article that talks about banning of schools. You know, students are on the rampage, banning of schools here in Kenya. And just 2 days ago, Madam November was talking about a school in Murang'a that was up in flames, you know. So just wanting to encourage us as firefighters to go out there, and you really don't have to have a letter, you know. You, by the virtue of being a firefighter, you have already the license to actually go and request for a talk. Just on Thursday, which is tomorrow, I'm having an opportunity to actually go to a school. I mean, to just talk about fire safety and fire prevention, and why students should not put up fire. So right here, right now, my word of encouragement to you, please go out there. By you being a first responder, a qualified EMT, a qualified paramedic, a qualified firefighter, please, let's rally up. Let's go out there. Let's preach this message about fire prevention, because if you don't do it, trust me, these kids are going to burn all these schools. And guess who's going to be the guys paying for the fees and the damage? You, the parents. So let us all rally up and go and assist these students to put out, not to light up fires. So thank you very much. Back to you, Chief Mike.
Thank you very much, Jose. I always appreciate your contributions to us here. I'll invite everybody to stick around after we've completed the training for tea time, where you can ask questions about today's training or anything else that's on your mind. If you attend at least 70% of today's training, you will be issued a certificate. And we also have a way for you to attend past trainings and receive a certificate of attendance. And we'll share some of that information in the chat throughout the training. This time I'm going to pass it over to Howard to begin our presentation. Take it away.
Good evening, everybody. Give me 1 second here to share my screen, and we'll get started. No, I'm not going to show you guys pictures of you guys. It's a little sizing thing here. Okay. What I'm going to talk about this morning is something called critical incident stress management. The shorthand for that is CISM. Before I do that, I want to I'll explain it in more detail as we go through. But for right now, I just want to start off by thanking all of you for devoting 50 to an hour of your time this evening to attend this webinar. I hope to make it worth your while. Time is precious, and I don't want to waste yours. And I also want to thank Africa Fire Mission for creating this opportunity, not only for all of you, but also for me. It's given me a very meaningful place to continue my involvement in the fire service post my retirement from active firefighting. And I retired because, you know, we don't get younger despite our best efforts. And I just decided it was time to move on to do something else in the fire service. So I'm really appreciative for them for providing this opportunity for me, but also it's an extraordinary program and providing a tremendous service to all of you. I think I can safely speak for Mike and everybody else from Africa Fire Mission. We are learning as much from all of you as you think you're learning from us, although probably we're learning more. So I want to thank all of you, and I also want to thank everybody who's taught me what I know about what I'm going to share with you and who's helped me become a better firefighter and a better person throughout my life. So I'm going to begin with a short video, and it's just a few minutes long, but it just talks about the emotional toll that being a first responder takes on a person. So you should be able to hear it and follow along.
We're sitting around the station. It was a Sunday afternoon, playing tiddlywinks or whatever. Probably not that, but I think we were playing cards. And I remember vividly complaining. It was boring. So this is boring. There's nothing going on. I wish it was a fire. And then the bell tipped and off we went. There was a fire across the street from the Admiral Street Fire Station, right across the street. Took us about 5 minutes to get there. We were in a different part of the town. And there were 2 kids in a rear bedroom. Search went on and they took the kids out and they were dead. 2-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. No, it was 1.5 and 3-year-old. And I was on the rescue that day, detailed. I was normally on the fire engine, but for some reason I've been detailed to rescue. So the fireman brought the one baby to me and just handed it to me. And then the body was so hot, my gloves actually melted onto his skin. And then they brought the little girl out and I had them both. And I brought them over to the rescue. And I was a fireman at the time. I wasn't even in EMS. I was an EMT basic. So I did what EMT basics do. I had both of them on the stretcher, doing compressions on one and bagging the girl. And anyways, I thought it was pretty bad, but I handled it. So I thought very well. Brought them to the hospital and tried, but they died. Then we have this thing called a critical incident stress debriefing. About a week later, and there was a veteran firefighter there, a guy named Billy. And we were talking about it, and it's supposed to help, but being an arrogant young man, I was kind of didn't need this, and I was just kind of going along for the ride. And Billy broke down. I just couldn't understand it. I truly couldn't understand why, because that's what we do, you know. The kids died, and it didn't bother me, so I thought. But I talked to Billy some years later, and he remembered that incident debriefing, and he remembered looking at me and saying, yeah, he's going to be in my shoes someday. And sure enough, I was. It just culminates. That call 24 years later, it's vivid as yesterday. It truly is. It's and it stuck with me, even though I didn't think it would. And all the other calls that went after it, they just add up. They really do. And it's we deal with it. We go on, but it changes you. It changes you a lot. And plus age, and I don't think there's anything far different from people aging and experiencing life. It's just a little more colorful at times, I think.
So, you know, he mentioned CISM, the critical incident stress management. He talked about the impact on him, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about a way to respond to traumatic experiences that you as a first responder might encounter or likely have encountered and or eventually will encounter. So we're going to talk about what's called critical incident stress management, CISM for short. What it is a peer-to-peer stress reduction program. It's not therapy. You do need a little bit of training to do it, and I'm going to give you a taste of the training today, but it's all about a first responder talking to a first responder. What it is a type of crisis intervention designed to provide support for those who have experienced traumatic events. It is a short-term, peer-to-peer stress reduction program. I want to emphasize peer-to-peer because nobody knows better about what you're experiencing than someone else who's a first responder. So the goals of SISM are pretty straightforward. There's 3 objectives. The point of having a SISM response, and I'll explain what those are later on, is to help first responders return to a good emotional, psychological health, place of good health. Look, you experience a traumatic event, it's a horrible accident. It affects us. There's no question about that. But what our goal is to get back to a place where we're processing, where we're handling in a healthy way what we've experienced. Second goal of SISM is to develop resilience. Resilience is bouncing back after those difficult experiences. And finally, it's to prevent the more serious PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's something that needs attention, and it's beyond the scope of SISM and a peer-to-peer intervention. But the goal of SISM is to prevent the need more serious intervention, and it works from all accounts. So this is what SISM does. SISM services are designed to enhance performance and increase stress resistance. Let me put that in shorthand. SISM is designed to help make you a better, stronger first responder who can respond to difficult situations and not let it tear your life apart or tear your family's life apart. So what does SISM do? It lessens the impact of the critical incident. Doesn't minimize it, doesn't diminish its importance or its power, but it lessens the impact on you. It normalizes the instinctive reactions to the incident. What that means to normalize is to say that how you're responding or reacting to the situation, that's normal. It may not be healthy, which is something we're going to address, but it's not abnormal to have strong reactions to difficult situations. So that's what it means to normalize the reaction to the incident. SISM encourages a natural recovery process. It's designed to help you use your resources, internal and external, meaning what's your inner strengths and abilities, plus those the resources you have around you to recover back to that place of healthy, normal, stable psychological and emotional health. It restores your adaptive functioning skills and or of the group. In other words, it makes you better to respond to things going on around you, not just react, not just the crisis things, but when we're under stress, we tend not to react as well to other things around us. So it helps you to build, reinforce, and get back to a baseline. And similarly, it helps a group work through so that it can get to a place of strength. Finally, it determines the need for further supportive services or therapy. In other words, if the system gets you to a certain level of functionality, but you're still really hurting, then that becomes an indication that now's time for additional supportive services. You may not need them, but then if you do, after you've gone through this process, you're in a better position to look into them. So the actual SISM program, it's a multiple crisis response system that was created by George Everly and Jeff Mitchell a number of years ago. And it consists of a number of components. A system can be involved, can be implemented with just individuals, peer-to-peer, one-to-one interventions. It can work with families, it can work with groups, organizations, and large-scale communities, depending on which level of the system component, which component of the system you're using. So with regards to assisting individuals, here are the steps that we go through. There's assessment. Is there a need for this? Psychological first aid. I'll talk more about this. One-on-one intervention. We'll talk a little bit more about this. And then if need be, follow-up referral. On the group side, there's three levels of group intervention. The first level is informational crisis sharing information, which is a large scale incident. A lot of people in the community are concerned. They want to know what's going on. So the group informational intervention is a way of sharing information to a large group of people to keep them informed about what's happening, which helps to alleviate anxieties, doesn't get rid of them because there's an event happening, but you're sharing information, you're keeping people appraised of what's going on at an appropriate level. Then there's diffusing and debriefing crisis. Diffusing is something you would do immediately after an incident, and then debriefing takes place up to ideally as soon as possible, 3 to 4 days afterwards, depending on what could be organized. And as a group, you go through a very specific set of steps to debrief the crisis. Defusing tends to happen more immediately after the event. We'll take questions afterwards if any come up, and also, and also at the tea time. So what is a critical incident? For our purposes, a critical incident is any event that can create significant human distress, and I also call it stress, and overwhelm a person's usual coping mechanisms. That's the definition of critical incident. The thing is that any event can create the distress or stress in you as an individual based on or dependent on what other things you've experienced and how you've processed them. So what might seem stressful to you might not be so stressful to the guy that you're working with, just because your life's experiences are different. Now, let's talk about stress. Stress is not a bad thing necessarily. There's actually two kinds of stress. There's a positive stress called eustress. You don't have to worry about the name. Just, you know that there's stress that can motivate you. It can lead you to improve performance. It can make you want to study something harder to be better at it. The stress of having to take an exam makes you study. That's not a bad thing. So positive stress, eustress, motivates and leads to improved health and performance. That's a good thing. Distress, or the negative stress, is stress that basically causes discomfort, pain, and can even cause dysfunction. SISM is about addressing distress. Sorry, my graphic is not as clear as I had hoped, but this just give you an example, again, about the two different kinds of stresses. Eustress, positive stress, is short-term, feels exciting, it motivates, it's performance-oriented. Anytime you've done something that you get an adrenaline rush, that's stress, that could be eustress kicking in. Can be fun. Distress, it can be short or long-term. Eustress tends to come and go much quickly, but distress lingers around because we tend to get caught up, and we get drawn into the rabbit hole. We call it a rabbit hole, which means we keep going further and further into the anxiety, into what causes the distress. Distress ultimately decreases our performance. It just makes us far less functional. Physiologically, it has a negative impact on it. Emotionally, psychologically, distress is just a bummer all around. So what are some examples? What can cause stress at work? Well, here's a partial list. And I suspect some or all of these things are things that most of you experience one way or the other. All right, a line of duty death. When one of your mates dies in an incident, that is stressful. It is stressful because we've lost a friend. It's stressful because it's tragic. And it's stressful because it's a reminder to us that could happen to us as well at any one of these scenes. Similarly, a serious line of duty. It's a reminder. Not only has our friend been hurt, but it's a reminder to us that we do dangerous work. Suicide of an emergency worker or a friend. Suicides take a real toll on us because we wondered, could we have helped it? Could we have prevented it? What signs did we miss? And then it also raises a specter of us having to think, start thinking about, if I can't handle my stress, will I want to commit suicide, and how will that affect me? So stress, suicide of someone we know or an other emergency worker, we don't even have to know them. We just have to know that they're in the same kind of work we are, is a reminder of the stresses of the work we're involved with. Any kind of multi-casual incident could be a disaster. Earthquakes causing buildings to collapse, building collapses just from faulty construction, flooding, where there's not just one victim, but multiple victims, and maybe the whole system, social structure has been broken down. That can cause an excessive amount of stress for us. Any kind of terrorist attack can be can induce stress in us. You all know that a bombing often is accompanied by a second bombing, because it puts other people more at risk. Police shooting, firefighter shooting, first responder shooting, any of those kinds of attacks on us as first responders heightens our risk factor, raises again the fact that we are in a dangerous business. Almost any event that involves children creates stress for us. Many of us have children. Many of us, we were all children at one time, and when children are so they're vulnerable, so that could affect us. When we know the victims, can be very stressful to us. Any prolonged incident with or without loss can create stress. You have to be out hours, for many hours trying to manage an incident, even if there's no traumatic event specifically involved with it, can create stress for you. Frankly, any significant event can lead to the stress for you in your work. So I'm not going to get into the physiology of stress, but generally stress does three things to us: causes us to want to fight, causes us to want to flee, or causes us to freeze. Any one of these three can manifest in our relationships and in our work. If we're under stress and we're in that fight mode, we might find ourselves in a lot of arguments with our partners, arguments with our spouses, arguments with our children, arguments with our bosses, arguments with people that we run into on the street. We may want to just escape from everything. We might just be, burying ourselves, in our rooms, and not interacting with people. That's a form of flight. And freezing, we might just not be able to function. So, the thing is that stress, as I said before, is a good thing. It evolved as a defense mechanism early on in our evolution as sapient beings. It helped us to escape dangerous animals. It helped us to be alert to dangers around us. So stress is a good thing and as a defense mechanism. The problem is that it can become a problem for us too. Stress is like a signal. It's telling us that something is wrong. So imagine you put your hand on a hot stove. Put your hand on a hot stove, you pull it off immediately because it's telling you this is dangerous. Stress does that to us. It tells us something is dangerous, and it makes us to want to respond. Now, when we have experienced stress, all kinds of things are happening inside our body. Our adrenaline glands are releasing a chemical called cortisone. In addition, all kinds of other physiological changes are happening within our body. That our heart rate increases, our blood pressure goes up, our electrolytes become imbalanced. All of these things over time actually have a debilitating effect on us and our physical health, our emotional health, our psychological health. So stress needs to be managed. It is a health risk factor to us. As an aside, I'm just finishing up a paper for a fire magazine on stress among older firefighters. We know about these basic stress factors and so forth, but what happens when you've been in the fire service for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years? How does it affect you? As the guy in the video said at the beginning, after a while it takes its toll. Well, it does. It takes a physical toll as well as the other kinds. All right, so stress can hit you as in a cumulative way. The picture on top of where it says accumulative stress is the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. I was concerned that that might be a metaphor that didn't translate, but I think it does, because since it comes from the Middle East anyway. But the metaphor is that, you know, things just keep adding up and adding up and adding up until finally something that seems insignificant causes the break. And that's the accumulative stress. It's building and building and building. On the other hand, there's catastrophic stress. You know, everything is going along just fine, and then something really horrible happens, and boom, you're overwhelmed. So both kinds of stresses we have to be on the alert for and prepare methods for responding to. Now let's start talking about responses to trauma. Look, everyone is going to react differently to the same event because everyone is different. Everyone has a different story leading up to where they are in life, to that moment in time. And there's just no way that everyone's going to have the same reaction. You're a normal person, and your reaction to an abnormal event is your reaction, and it may not be the same as that of another normal person who experienced the same incident. This is really important to get into your head. Your response to an abnormal event is not going to be the same as the person next to you. And that doesn't mean that your response or that other person's response is wrong. Everyone's going to respond differently. The next line is highlighted in red because it's really important. There are healthy and unhealthy ways to handle stress. CISM, critical incident stress management, is an evidence-based method for handling stress in a healthy way. That's what CISM is. So learning the CISM method for yourself and for your colleagues is a way to help people handle the stress. Oh, I should also say that with regard to CISM model, when we're doing it, what we're looking at is each individual's response. That's the focus. It's not the event itself. There are facts and details about the event that are part of the storytelling about as one's processing, but it's not about the event. It's about the individual's response. And that's really important. It's focused on you as a person and how you're responding. So let me say this, it's bold. The purpose of CISM is to help your peers cope with the stress caused from the traumatic event. Learning the methods of CISM is also a way of helping yourself. Again, CISM is about lessening the impact of the critical incident. It's about normalizing the reactions to the incident. It's about encouraging the natural recovery process. It's about restoring or learning adaptive functioning skills, and it's about determining whether or not more support is needed down the road. So, friends, are you listening? The foundation of a helping relationship, which is the basis of CISM work, is listening. Crisis intervention depends on the ability to listen. Listening leads to empathy. It is essential for gaining information about the incident and what's going on with the person and or people you're trying to help. Unfortunately, listening is not as easy as we think it is. There are a lot of obstacles to really quality listening to someone. For example, if you assume you know what the person will say, you might be inclined to jump to fill in their sentences for them or draw conclusions that you have to pull back from, which is, and again, inhibits your listening because, oh, I think I know where they're going to go, so I'm not really going to be paying attention as much. Sometimes you'll be more focused on how you'll respond when someone says something you want to disagree. So you can't wait till they pause so you can say, but wait a second. Or you are too interested to ask curious about asking a question to actually listen to everything else they're saying. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and they say something and you are eager to ask them a question to clarify, but you fail to listen closely enough to realize that they do clarify, but you stop listening. Sometimes while we're listening, we'll be so concerned with wanting to respond that we'll start judging them. We may start offering unwanted or ill-timed advice. We might want to disagree with them. There might be language barriers. There might be noise that makes it really hard to hear them. And we might experience this thing what's called contra-transference. This is when you as the helper over-identify with the person you are trying to help. And now you're not really helping them. So these are just different obstacles to listening. But the bottom line, the foundation of a helping relationship, peer-to-peer, is listening. So now we're involved in, we're listening to someone, but we need to also be able to identify stress-related symptoms. What are the signs and symptoms of stress? If we were in a group setting and it was easier to have conversations back and forth, but with 52 plus people, it's really hard to do. So here are some stress-related symptoms: anxiety, panic, anger, helplessness, depression, suicidal ideation, violence, impulsivity, self-medication. That means like drinking and using drugs excessively, and just being stressed out, just wired and snapping, and just everything is feels like a crisis. Like, oh man, why did that happen? My shoelace broke. Not a really big deal, but it stresses you out. These are all symptoms of experiencing stress in the negative sense. So you're experiencing all this stress. How do we cope with it? Well, here's a long list of unhealthy responses. They are coping mechanisms to stress, but ultimately they're unhealthy. And if you look at them closely, you'll see how they fit in with the fight, flight, or freeze mode. You might find yourself glued to the TV screen or some other screen, whether it's TV or your phone or a computer screen, just watching, mindlessly lost in watching TikTok videos or something else, just wasting hours, not interacting with people. You might withdraw from your friends or your partners. On the flip side of that, you might all of a sudden start jumping into a frenzied social life where you're just doing anything to avoid your problems. You're fleeing from them, right? You're just going out, staying out late all night long. You're just almost crazed. Another unhealthy response is overeating. You eat it's kind of a form of self-medication. You eat just to feel good, but then you start putting on weight and then you feel really bad about yourself. And that kind of compounds everything. Some people stop eating when they're under stress. They just don't have any appetite. Some people can't get out of bed. They find themselves sleeping hours and hours more than they usually do. Then there's this feeling of being burnt out. You just don't care. You don't have any enthusiasm. You don't have any motivation. You're burnt out. Drinking too much booze, alcohol is a sign, is an unhealthy response. We see that, I wouldn't say promoted, but we see that in video, in movies a lot, people drinking too much, people responding to a crisis by going to the bar and drinking, give me another one, give me another one. Sometimes we just lash out at others in emotionally or physically violent ways. Could be our partners, could be our pets, could be strangers we see on the streets. Car rage, road rage, you've heard about that. That's stress acted out towards strangers. Could be our partners, could be our loved ones, could be our children. Sometimes we take up unhealthy habits like smoking, or we smoke more than usual. I've seen people like crisis event, I need a cigarette, right? That's just, it's an unhealthy response. Using drugs, legal or unlegal, legal or illegal, prescription or over the counter, sleeping pills, muscle relaxants, anxiety pills, any kind of drugs, legal or unsafe, are stress responses. Let's get now I'm going to go into the core elements of a system program. There's 7 components to it. There's the pre-crisis preparation. This includes stress management education, stress resistance, and crisis mitigation training for individuals and organizations. In other words, you're at your firehouse and you sit down with a group of people and you can say, let's talk about how we can handle stress. What are stress management mechanisms we could use? How do we build resilience to stress? In other words, you're preparing for stressful experiences. You're preparing. That's a preset you can do within yourself, your organization, or someplace else. Second level 2, and not to be confused with number 1, but second step is when I say education, I'm talking about providing education to large groups or any size scale, any size group, depending on the size of the group you're interacting. It could be a school, could be a support program, and it's about information sharing. You know, what happened, what's going on, how it's being addressed, and keeping people apprised of what's happening. The defusing and the debriefing methods, CISD, it's a subset of CISM. This is a 3-phase structured small group discussion provided within hours, or if it's a system, then it's the debriefing. It's up to a few days, up to provided with 1 to 10 days for the purposes of assessing, triaging, and acute symptom mitigation. I'll say that again. The CIS diffusing and CISD debriefings, the diffusing takes place within hours of the event, and the debriefing can take place from 1 to 10 days afterwards. And they're all 3 are really designed to assess where people are, triage, in other words, provide immediate support, and then address the acute signs and symptoms. That's the acute symptom mitigation. That's the final technical term. Also, steps 3 and 4 specifically refers to something called the Mitchell model. It in itself has several steps to it, and it works really well. However, you have to follow the steps. One of the criticisms of the system model is that it doesn't always work. And what we've found is that it doesn't always work if you don't follow the steps. If you follow the steps, it's a really effective program. And then, you can do this with family crisis interventions, groups, and then have some follow-up. And then there's an element also of one-on-one crisis intervention. And this is something that you do, usually you'd start immediately after, like an event happens, you go up to somebody and say, hey, you okay? What's happening? But it's the kind of thing you do after some time has passed and you see that maybe one of your peers is having a hard time, or you are having a hard time, and you seek out a peer to just talk through it. It's not therapy. That's the important part. You're talking to a peer, you're getting the support. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, and it's probably, I should probably pick up my pace because there was some other stuff I wanted to do, but I'm going to show you a pyramid. This is a famous model. It's called the Maslow pyramid. And it's got these 5 stages. I'm not going to go through them in all detail. You can see them on the screen. It's got a physiological level, which is, breathing, food, water, sex, sleep, homeostasis. It's the physical level. So next level is safety, personal safety, physical safety, emotional safety. And then as you go higher up this pyramid, in Maslow's model, you have to first take care of the bottom level, the physiological stuff. Then you can move on, then you move up to the second level, the safety level, and higher and higher. And what we're striving for is to reach the top of the pyramid, where we're self-actualized, we're creative, we're spontaneous, we're able to problem solve. This Maslow pyramid provides the kind of the foundation of the psychological foundation of what we do. So crisis intervention, the very first thing you need to do is you need to pay attention. How is the person breathing? Are they breathing? As we know from first aid, if you're not breathing, you're near dead. So are they breathing? Do they need food? Do they need water? You know, are they extremely tired? What's happening to them? You know, you have to address the basic levels. There's a crisis. It's raining. So you see somebody. Your first concerns are, is this person hungry, cold, wet, or maybe even still in physical danger? So you want to address the physical level of first when you're responding to someone. This is known as psychological or emotional first aid. First, you address the physiological levels. Then you start to move up to the safety level. You know, do they feel safe? You know, and this model that the notes up here talk about employment, resources, morality, family, health, and property. They're just different elements of sort of the safety level that a person, you know, it's like, do I feel safe? And am I going to lose my job? Did I lose my home? Did I lose, you know, is my family at risk? Things like that. But it's really it's also physical safety. So we do those, and then we could start moving up a little higher as we're addressing psychological in the psychological first aid. Now, you know, at this third level, it says friendship, family, sexual intimacy. We're not having sex with people. We're trying to provide psychological first aid with or encourage them to have sex. That's not what that's about. It's just the pyramid model that I found is not the best detail. But at this third level, we might need to be, the person might be concerned about their family or friends. So you've taken care of them physically. They've given them water. You give them something to eat. You've made them dry, get warm. They're now beginning to feel physically safer. Okay. Now they're going to be concerned about their family members, their loved ones. And that's where you might, you know, might need physiological and psychological first aid kicks in, where you might need to say, we can get a hold of your family members for you. We can get a hold of your, you know, your children or your partner. So these are the three levels that psychological and emotional first aid are going to address. All right. So you're responding to a crisis. You see somebody and this person looks like they need some help. You want to help them out. It's good to remember that the majority of people exposed to traumatic events, whether they're first responders or otherwise, will not need formal therapy. They do need someone, they likely will need someone to intervene and help them out. They might need someone to help them normalize the crisis. Like I said, to let them know that their response is not wrong or abnormal. Their response is their normal response to a really bad event. At the same time that when you're doing that, you also don't want to dismiss the seriousness of the crisis or the reactions. In other words, you don't want to just say, oh no, that's fine, that's normal. No, what you're going to say is like, you're a normal person and you're responding to a really abnormal thing, and how you're responding, that's okay. We just need to learn we need to figure out how to shift away from that unhealthy response. For the most part, any kind of intervention with someone should be voluntary. In other words, don't force yourself on them. An individual, when you're dealing with them in crisis, should not be encouraged to talk about what happened or relive the event unless they are comfortable doing so and want to do so. The important thing is to focus on their reactions, not what happened. And of course, whenever you're in doubt with what you need, with the assistance you're providing, seek assistance, seek help. Here are some things not to do when you're working with someone in crisis. Don't say, I know how you feel. This is something we all tend to do. We do want to jump in and say, I know how you feel, but the truth is we never know how someone else feels about an incident that they've happened. And we don't want to take away their a sense of agency over the experience. You can affirm what they feel, but you don't know how they feel. Let them share what they feel and affirm what they're feeling, but don't say, I know how you feel. Personally, I resent that when someone says to me. I want to say, no, you don't know how I feel. You get that something bad happened, but you don't know how I feel. Don't say it's not so bad. Maybe it's not so bad for you, because how you're responding, you have the skills. it may be pretty bad for somebody else based on their skills. Although there's a tendency among lots of people to want to say this was God's will, this is a very problematic statement because it opens up a whole can of worms about theology. More specifically, about something called theodicy. You know, why does God let bad things happen in the world? So you don't want to get into that. First of all, you don't know what the theology of the person is you're interacting with. And secondly, your theology is your theology. And so it's best not to mix it at this stage in the process, or at any stage really, but at this stage, they don't need advice or simple, what are otherwise simple answers from someone providing support. Similarly, God won't give you more than you can handle. People want to say that, but that's not, and I tell you this basically both as a CISM practitioner and as a clergy person for 30 plus years. Telling someone that God won't give you more than you can handle opens up a huge can of worms, which you don't want to be dealing with in the moment as you're trying to help a person address their, reduce their stress level in their lives. You also don't want to minimize their suffering, their experience, and their stress by saying others have it worse. No, to say something like, oh, you think this is a bad incident? You should have seen what we had last week. That's not helpful. Similarly, telling someone to just forget it and move on, not healthy either, because you don't forget it. We never forget it. It stays with us. So here's a model that we use. I think it can be helpful for you if you like the mnemonics. It's called the SAFER model of individual crisis intervention. Actually, it's technically called SAFER-R because they revised it, but I left that part out. So number one, you want to stabilize a person. That's that first level in the pyramid. Get them dry, get them water, get them food, get them out of cold or out of the heat. Number two, acknowledge the event acknowledge the event and the reactions. Say, yeah, something happened. And we see these, this is what's happening. We see that this is causing you a lot of stress, and we see this is you're upset. Help them understand that their response is normal for them. It doesn't mean that it's the healthy response, but it's normal. There's nothing wrong with them for responding the way they're responding. It's just as an aside on this one here, I give a lot of talks, and sometimes I get choked up, like it'll be an emotional event. I'm at a funeral or something, and I've learned from a long time that's normal for me. So I don't apologize if I choke up while I'm giving a talk someplace. And I had the opportunity to talk to some kids graduating from a school program, and I shared that advice with them. It's your response to something is normal, and how you manage it and handle it is what we're focusing on. E is to encourage effective coping. In other words, okay, you had a bad experience. Yes, you had these responses. What are some effective ways we can do? You can manage the stress you're having. And then finally, recovery or referral as needed. So I want to go back just to spend a little more time on these. So S as in stabilize also means to introduce yourself. Again, make sure basic needs are met and reduce stressors. It's important to identify yourself to someone so they know who you are. Hey, I'm Howard, retired firefighter. I'm a system instructor. I'm here to, let's talk. Acknowledge the event or reactions really means to let the people tell their story. And then I think I've explained the others pretty depth. So in terms of encourage effective coping, I will make available a document that my system team uses that gives a whole lot of examples of effective ways to address effective coping methods. All right, I want to shift gears for a second here and jump in and talk about suicide interventions. Number one, if you suspect somebody is considering suicide, or you have whatever reasons to believe that they might be thinking about it, talk to them about it. Do not think that talking about raising the question of suicide with someone is going to move them closer towards it. There's so much evidence that points to just the opposite. Do not be afraid to say to somebody, Do you really want to die? Or do you just want things different? You know, are you thinking about suicide? It's really important to put this out there. I have a really great video on how to talk about suicide. If anyone's interested about it, you can let me know through AFM, and I can make that. I'll just share the video. It's really, really well done. The second C in this model, contradict them. Let them know that a person who has suicide ideation, let them know that the desired outcome will not be reached. Problems will not be solved. In fact, you'll only create more problems. Do whatever you can to delay them. Keep talking, do whatever, and then refer them for continued care. So that's for suicide intervention. So I think I'm running out of time here. So I'm gonna, just, this is kind of just a reiteration of stuff. So let me just go through this real quick. I was hoping to use the breakout rooms. I had some scenarios for all of you to look at. I'll flash them up here at the end. They will be available for you with the slideshow that will be available after today. I encourage you to go to them. I'll get to them in a second, but I encourage you to take them, go back to your firehouses and use these scenarios as ways to practice individual intervention. So here's a model for what to do as an individual intervention. And I also want to tell you that to be a trained system responder, you first take a course for individual intervention. So that's really what I'm giving you the information about. The next level is how to work with a whole group. I haven't really touched on that. It's not complicated, but I just didn't really have the time to do it. So here are the steps. Introduce yourself. Meet the basic needs and stabilize the person. I've already gone over these. Listen to their story. What happened? What's their reactions? Again, this is just a summary, a review of everything. Reflect their emotions. Sounds like you were scared, numb, etc. You're affirming what they've experienced. You're not telling them what they experienced. You're affirming what they've told you. That's really important because it means you're listening to them, and people want to be listened to. Paraphrase what they're saying. Goes back to, sounds like you were scared. I hear what you're saying. Normalize it. What you're experiencing is normal because it's your experience. It may not be the next person's over. Attribute their reactions to the situation, not personal weaknesses. In other words, you're reacting to the situation. You're not a weak person. You're not a bad person because you're crying or because you feel unable to function. You're reacting, and it's a normal reaction for you to the difficult situation. Just because your mate is able to react differently doesn't mean you're not as good or capable or that you're a weak person. That's important. Identify stress management tools. Again, that'll be a handout available to you. And then identify as needed external support or resources. In other words, when you guys have a person who's having a problem or you're having a problem, do you know where to go to get help? If not, you need to generate that data, that information for folks. So this is wrapping everything up, and I've thrown a lot of stuff at you. I'm sure there'll probably be questions, and I'm just about out of time, and Leah would have shut me off by now. Mike's being nice to me, but I'll be around for the tea time to answer any questions people have. Here are the scenarios. Scenario 1, you can see it. Your crew is called to responding to a building collapse. When you arrive in the scene, your incident commander instructs you to look for non-injured survivors and provide appropriate crisis intervention if necessary. You walk around, you spot a person covered in dust, hugging himself and sobbing. What do you do? Okay, there's a series of little scenarios like that. I have 3 of them. They're there for you to look at, work at it with your group at your firehouse. And then again, I will provide the Green Mountain, that's what GM stands for, Green Mountain Systems Debriefing handout. Just as a postscript before I wrap up, I'm actually a member of 2 system teams. One is the Green Mountain System team. We've been around for 30 plus years, cover the entire state of Vermont. And a new program called Secure was started, and I'm part of that team too. We work with each other like mutual aid works when you assist one fire department another. And that, my friends, wraps up. And I want to say thank you for listening. And I hope my information has been useful to you as firefighters and first responders. And I'll field questions with whatever time Mike will give me and or at tea time. And as I always do when I finish up these programs, I say, I'm reminded of this quote from Kurt Wagenbach, who was a Vermont state trooper. He says, "We don't rise to the occasion, we fall back on our training." I cannot emphasize the importance of training and practicing and reviewing and learning stuff and reviewing because you do not have time in the moment of a crisis to pull out your textbook and review stuff. You've got to be able to fall back on your training. And lastly, have faith in God if that is your orientation, but trust in your training because that's what's going to pull you through a tough situation. And on that note, I'm going to wrap up and stop sharing my screen as soon as I can. Just a second here. I've got my screen all different sizes and
I got you taken care of, Howard. And
you got it. Thanks.
yep.
And,
Thank you so much for all that you do for AFM, Howard. Really, you're a blessing to us organizing our virtual training here, participating in the training, and you always bring such a great perspective on these topics. We really appreciate your experience and giving your time to share that with everyone. I want to thank everybody else for coming to today's training. I would encourage you to fill out our evaluation that I linked in the chat, and join us again next week. Share with your friends. Be sure to check out the Google folder that I linked to, where if you didn't make enough time in today's session, you can go back, review the video, answer a question, give us a brief summary of what you got out of the training, and we'll issue that certificate of attendance. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you again next week.